Okay, so a few words of advice of what I do. One, when I came to my plates, remember I did wire cut these completely. So when all I did the entire time, like I draped them when I was done throwing, and then the next day I wrapped them really well. I wrapped them under and over when I came in the next day, just because I knew I wasn't going to be doing this demo for a little bit. When I uncovered them today, they were pretty much good to go. They released fully off the bat themselves, which was nice. That's usually what I like to see. I usually don't want to have to, if I have to wire cut them again, that's telling me that they're not ready to be trimmed. But again, if they released on their own as well, they could as well be really, really way too hard to trim as well. So you got to have that balance. So of course it was like this, right? So cannot say enough, don't pick up your plates. Always take bats, kind of flip things like this. But every single time that you pull the edge of a plate, you're warping and distorting it. So you're gonna want to get used to doing things like that. I mean, of course, at some point, you're gonna need to pick it up. So what I usually like to do for these kind of plates is I like to do at least a marking right here, and I put this all the way through. So what that's telling me is it's giving me a marking right there, which is basically telling me where like the center of my foot should be. My foot should line up on this style of plate really directly underneath that cut. That's gonna give me a really balanced plate because I'm following the form, basically. And this one I did a needle tool check to check for thickness overall. And you can do this if you want. You really do have to make sure that those holes are patched back though well. So when I do a needle tool check for thickness, I mean, I'm coming up with about this. So I'm trying to just kind of ingrain that in my mind. Okay, so I want to make sure that I trim on a bat as well because I don't want to have to pick this up off of the wheel. Again, because then I can distort things heavily. So I get another bat. So I have a whole bunch of trimming tools here. One of the things that is so important when it comes to trimming plates is that you have sharp trimming tools. It's going to require you to have less pressure in that center, which in turn will help the plate not to bow and collapse or break. So I usually kind of pull every single trimming tool that I have. Well, I mean, all my sharp ones, you know. So I have a selection of what is going to work the best. I have some small ones as well. What I don't want to do is I don't want to lose this dot. So I'm going to definitely make some sort of distinguishing line telling me where that dot was, because that's kind of where my foot should be, basically. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim away all this excess. So again, I'm replicating interior, the shape of the form, I'm replicating it. So I know that right about here it starts flaring out. All of this is excess. Okay, so I got a lot of that away. I could level this off now if I wanted to. And now I'm going to start where my foot's going to be. I usually start a little bit larger, and I can always decrease it. I definitely don't want a teeny tiny foot. I'm having in my memory as well how deep my needle tool check was. So if you have not gotten to this place yet where you are understanding trimming, trimming a big thing, and I've said it in my intro classes, I say it now, the rule of thumb is your tool moves slow, your wheel moves fast. That's how you're going to be able to trim evenly. You're going to be able to keep a consistency in your trimming. I still see a lot of students trimming like at this speed. Like, this isn't working very well at all. That higher speed helps a lot of the clay grab. So notice that when I'm in the center of the plate, I'm going by layer, right? Because it is a little tricky, you know, you have all this, if you put too much pressure, it could just drop, really. So I do kind of go layer by layer by layer. You get that edge defined there. Again, this type of trimming too is going to really help with the compression from both sides. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so kind of want to get off some of the excess on this edge here. Take that in. And I'm just going to refine that foot, taking away any sharpness. So the last thing I do, I want to trim this edge. Again, it's so important to have a sharp trimming tool when you're doing this. I'm putting really light pressure in that center point. All right, so I'm gonna see how that feels. Oops, sorry. That feels pretty good. So I just want this edge a little bit more crisp. That one. That looks nicer. The second one that I did as a demonstration had no base specific to it. It was a curve. So again, I'm going to want to see how that looks to me. I'm understanding like how the curve is looking. If there's any like visual discrepancies, there's a little bit of a strangeness here that I'm not very happy about. I'm thinking about where I want my foot to line up underneath this form by how wide this is. So for me, I mean, I definitely want it to be a pretty functional plate. So I'm probably looking at about right here that I want my foot line to go under. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to measure really the thickness in the center, because that's going to be the thinnest. And it is, it's quite thin. Again, so I'm taking in mind where I put that little dot here. Oh, my tool here. And I'm gonna give myself an understanding that everything from here down is gonna be curved. Kemper or Dolan, like this is a Kemper tool, that's a Dolan tool. I was doing some research for students in the intro class, and I kind of looked up like what one of these is, and it's about $11 or $12 on Clay King. It is worth the investment. It really does help me. And you can also find them, you know, at, I think Mid-South does have them, but a lot of times they're like sold out, so it just depends. So again, I'm gonna start with a larger foot ring, then maybe I'm gonna end up with, I also have the idea in my head is that, okay, this is all trimmed at a curve. It's a slight curve, but it's a curve. So very different than that plate, the base was absolutely flat. I'm gonna be able to dig down a little bit deeper here than I am here. So just in the same as when you trim a bowl, although it's not that extreme, but still I have that in my head. I know this was very thin, but this isn't. So I'm gonna be able to go a lot deeper here. And then I'm just gonna transition to that depth. So maybe this plate would be one that I wouldn't be able to put glaze here just because of that little bit of thinness at that center point. I'm just kind of really enhancing where that foot is so I can get a trimming tool in there clean. It spun off a little on me again. Not bad. So, I mean, I do love trimming plates. It's really great, but they do take a lot of time. Because notice that I'm just kind of moving back and forth between things. I'm moving between this, I'm moving between this, and nothing is really totally, completely trimmed. I'm working on it as I go together, and that kind of really helps kind of me understand how much I can go in one area, how much I can go on another, by how far I'm able to trim in different areas. So I'm learning as I'm trimming. That's why I'm stopping and I'm moving here. So if I'm trimmed low to a certain point here, then I know I can trim slightly lower on this end here. That's what it's telling me. It's giving me all of that information. So I'm going back and forth, and so I need to then go back and clean this up after I've trimmed that lower. And if I trimmed it any lower, well then I need to fix this one. And then that's influencing how much I can trim this. Jeez. That's a big fly. Okay, really? All right, just sit with me, it's all right. Just watch. You wanna watch? What's all that stuff? of course I'm going to round off this foot as well. Like I said, you know, when I did the plate throwing demo, I said, you know, and I remember because I watched the video before I edited it and all that stuff, it's a long demonstration. It's a boring demonstration, but it's an important demonstration for you to see how I go about doing things in actual time. That this is not taking me, I started this has been 2 plates and it's been, what, about 20 minutes. So it's taking me a good amount of time per plate. And there is a good amount of clay. Whenever I make plates, it is a ton of reclaim, and I'm aware of that. It just is what it is. All right, so I'm gonna see how that feels, but I'm first gonna trim this edge a little bit. Sometimes with curved forms, what's also really nice to do is to trim using your metal rib tool. It depends on the clay that you're using, but sometimes a metal rib tool, depending on how your position you're holding it, can actually trim a form really well, especially a curve.